Hi, and welcome to the Courage Made Simple podcast. I'm Margareta Kull, a mother of 3 courageous young women and a courageous leader trainer. For the past 20 years, I've helped hundreds of leaders from over 50 countries, from senior executives to aspiring change makers, find the courage to face challenges at work and at home. I know firsthand that leading isn't just about work. Whether it's guiding a team at work, setting boundaries at home, showing up for the people who matter most, or navigating other tough decisions, courage is essential in every part of life. It's how we become the people we want to be. This podcast is a space to explore the messy questions of being a leader at work and at home. Through insights, tools, and personal stories, we'll help you find your courage. If you're ready to move from feeling stuck, overwhelmed, or frustrated to becoming a more confident, capable, and courageous leader, you're in the right place. Let's get started. Before we dive in, I'd love to hear from you. What's a challenge or question you'd like me to explore in this podcast? Send me a DM on LinkedIn or Instagram at Margareta Kull. I'd love to hear your thoughts and answer your questions in future episodes. Hi, Peter.
Hello, Margareta.
And welcome to the Courage Made Simple podcast.
Thank you very much for having me.
I am really looking forward to this conversation. How about you introducing yourself first? Who are you and what do you do, for a living and so forth?
Who am I? That's the big question, right? That's something you go throughout life to figure out, and it evolves, right? But in essence, I'm a Swedish national, born and grew up in Sweden, but I've worked out of my native country for the past 25 years. So at this point, half my life, I've not been living in Sweden. I've been working outside in management and human resources for international organizations. And most recently, or half of that period, with the United Nations Development Program. Uh, with that, I was brought to Copenhagen, working for a global shared service center, but then finding an itch to try to get out into the world and get into the field where the essence of the organization is. So that drew me to Mogadishu, Somalia, and then most recently to Kabul, Afghanistan, where I've been serving as HR manager and kind of chief of talent acquisition, recruitment, onboarding, talent development, organizational change, and all that good stuff that happens in organizations and companies. So that's where I find myself at the moment.
That's fascinating. Yeah, when I think of you, I always think of Afghanistan, but I'd love to hear some about Mogadishu in Somalia as well. It's really interesting to hear all your experience from that pretty long period of your life.
It has been, and I count myself very fortunate and lucky to have had opportunities present themselves for me to seize and develop from. And looking back and thinking in terms of our conversation today, also just reflecting on, well, where is life's path taken me and where am I right now? And it's not over, so there should be other things ahead. And you always need to lean back and think on what you've gone through, to use that as an opportunity to gain strength. And it also comes with maturity. And I'm sure we'll get into that because I think it's an important component of leadership, realizing that in life stages, you go through different things. You're anxious and you want to prove yourself, and then you relax and so on. And certainly my experience in Somalia, in Afghanistan, but also in headquarters locations with all that entails, have given me such opportunities of growth, personally and professionally.
Mm. How do you think it's affected you as a
Uh,
leader?
Sometimes it challenged me a lot. It hasn't been without its challenges and frustrations and periods of doubting myself, doubting where the team is at and what we're able to achieve under the circumstances. Certainly in Somalia and Afghanistan, them being hardship locations, post-conflict countries with tremendous challenges for our personnel and for the country, you're facing things that I would never have imagined growing up in Sweden, right? And then I'm thrown into that as an individual, needing to live there and work together with colleagues, and as a leader, a manager, trying to support and make sure that we can deliver. And in essence, being with UNDP as a development program, we're trying to deliver for the people of those countries who are in poor situations, who are in insecurity, lacking education and basic needs. And that's tough. That can be very tough. Certainly, I've been frustrated and anxious about my own performance as a colleague, as a leader, and as an individual.
It reminds me of the international teams I've come across in my work with the UN. It wouldn't surprise me if some of our listeners don't really take that aspect into their thinking when they're thinking about the teams that you lead, you and other leaders lead within the UN. What a challenge that can be. If you look at those teams in Somalia and in Afghanistan, how many different, not only countries, but also cultures do you have in those teams? And in other teams that you notice, I mean, I've come across people who said, look, there are 12 people, there are 8 different cultures in that team.
It's a complexity of nationalities and cultures and personalities express themselves in different ways depending on their cultural background. So I would say how many? Loads. And you just have to account for all of them and navigate all of them. Your supervisor or manager might have a certain approach to things that you're not used to, and you need to adjust for that. Your team members have different strengths and challenges, just like you do. Navigating it is not easy. It's part of life, and it's exciting once you realize that, and once you relax into that to say, that's the reality. But just because, and I've been reflecting a lot recently on the thing of reality and one's own reality, and how important it is not to take on the reality that someone else perceives for you of you, but instead own your own and make sure that you work in that and then dialogue with others. Of course, it is essential to listen to others, to understand where they're coming from. But someone else's perception of the task ahead of us is not the full truth, as much as my perception of the task ahead of us is not the full truth. It's that elephant and describing it from different angles kind of thing. And it's not easy. One thing that strikes me of the multicultural aspect and being in an international organizations and the UN is the sense of mission and purpose. I remember as a teenager and growing up and thinking, what's the meaning of life? It's that eternal question. What's the purpose of my life? What is the contribution I'm supposed to make? And that has really stayed with me as one of the kind of essential unresolved questions, unanswered questions of life. And I don't think it will ever be responded to, and that's okay. I think now I've relaxed into that to say, it's a journey. It's not the answer. It's not the period. What is wonderful to see is that in the United Nations, as well as many other organizations, people are attracted to work there because of the sense of mission and purpose. So I was drawn to it. I didn't really see myself going into a for-profit company or going into business. I dabbled a bit. Going at university was doing a number of things, but my passion was really to do something that was more humanitarian, developmental, doing something for others, but still have a career out of it and grow and develop and contribute. And in every survey that we have in the UN system and in UNDP, in terms of engagement, this sense of purpose and mission always rates high. And to me, that's very comforting. And it's a tremendous strength that you're in it for the sense of purpose, not primarily for the sense of your paycheck or the monetary aspect of things.
Yeah, that's so good to hear. And I also seen it and I've noticed it. And one way of just seeing it is actually noticing the amount of work many of you put in. And that's, of course, connected to the purpose and the mission.
And when you have a lot of work to do and tremendous stress and a lot of uncertainties, it's a moving target. You don't know what's going to get thrown at you. That sense of mission and purpose is something that stays with you, gives you added strength. It can make sure you can go that extra mile, work all those evenings and all those weekends. And certainly in places like Kabul and Mogadishu, wasn't much else for me to do because of restrictions on security. So I worked a lot. I only worked a lot because I liked my work and the contributions I was making, and I saw the purpose of it.
Wow, I can't wait to hear more about all of that. I need to stop myself from keep asking questions, and let's stay on track. Let's start to talk a little bit about courage. I'm really curious to hear, your thoughts, your view on courage. Has it changed over time? And if that's the case, when and why and how? And, I'm really looking forward to hearing this.
So I was thinking of this leading up to our conversation, and more, when I think of courage, I think about being deliberate. And deliberate is my go-to favorite word. It means that you do things consciously, you think things through. And it resonates very much with your model of being a courageous leader in terms of stopping, reflecting, choosing, and acting, right? So this sense of being deliberate. And I think in that, one is very courageous. And as a leader, as a manager, it means you stop, you take responsibility for what you do and your actions, your relationship with others, especially in settings that are so complex and messy, where there are many conflicting priorities and demands, a lot of stress. And increasingly, organizations go through continuous change, and that's disruptive. So how do you make sure that you, through that, keep your calm and listen a lot? And to me, that is very courageous, to take that responsibility as opposed to just going with the flow, and going with the flow of how organizations move in patterns that may or may not be conducive and up to speed for our time. We may not be fit for purpose in what we're doing right now, and we need to be, because the pressures of finances and the pressures of the world and the future of our humanity and Earth all depend on it. So to be deliberate is so important. From it also comes this sense of being committed to one's values and principles. So knowing to make sure that you are grounded in something. There's a belief system. It can come from your religion, from your culture, from your upbringing, from your set of values adopted over time and through your academic studies or work life, but essentially in how you relate to others and your relationships. And with age, and we all say this a lot, the most important thing are relationships. Other things come and go, but if you nurture your relationships and make sure that they are strong, they will empower you, just as you will empower others. And that's courageous. But it also makes sure that you can be more courageous, because I give my courage to others and they give courage to me.
Why is it courageous?
To be true to yourself, to be true to your values, and to be responsible. It's always easier to just go with the flow. If you're thrown in the river and it's just marching full force ahead in one direction, to swim upstream is very courageous and very cumbersome. That's a pain. I don't want to do that. But being deliberate and making the hard choices after proper reflection and communicating with others on that takes courage.
Yeah, it's interesting you saying that. It reminds me of what I say. Courage is never comfortable. I mean, there are many good things that you can do. You can take very comfortable action that is good. But I'm just saying, fortunately, we don't need to be courageous all the time, but it's just not courageous.
Yeah. And people often think, they say, oh, what is courage? Well, it's taking care of one's fear of heights, for example. And it's similar to that. It can be dazzling. It can be frightening to be at a vantage point looking down and getting a little bit dizzy. But if you feel secure in yourself, you grab a hold of something and you look down, then your vantage point and what you see will be unique. You might see something that someone else does not see because you're standing there. Yes, I'm fearful of the height, but I'm also respectful for the fear and for the situation. And I act accordingly. So if there's something for me to grab hold on to, great, then I'll stable myself. If there's someone whose hand I can take, even better, because then we're in it together, hopefully. And the other person won't push me off the cliff, hopefully. But it's a good thing. And vantage point and this sense of reflecting on the situation, the circumstances, and the options is a good thing. And then feel the courage to say something, to act.
And sometimes it can be courageous to not say anything.
Yes, you want to. And I come into those situations a lot. I want to say too much, and I just need to, Peter, shut up. My little thing inside my head just tells me, no, shut up, don't say it, take pause.
It comes down to, so much, but of course, our fears and our defenses. And the defenses kick in, and we just feel that urge to do something and to say something. And, instead of what you're talking about is stop and reflect.
Yeah. And realizing sometimes I don't have all the information. I really just need to be in the listening mode. As a manager, as a senior manager, you feel the pressure to always perform, to be that perfect person, to be the one with all the answers, to be the one with the most glorious strategy and implementation plan, right? So it takes courage then to say, I don't have all the answers, but I have surrounded myself with the team who collectively will produce answers and have a path forward. I've also surrounded myself with people who are smarter than me, and that takes courage. That's not the old school of leader and manager, because you were supposed to be the smartest one in the room. But the way to go is like, no, you can facilitate the smartest people in the room to be able to deliver on the mission of the business, the organization, or the mission.
And dare to say, I don't know.
I don't know. I'll get back to you.
That can be so courageous.
Yeah. Instead of giving a wrong answer. And being in human resources, I quickly learned that lesson, to say someone comes to me with a question on their entitlements or on their situation. I need to make sure that my answer is grounded in HR policy and procedure.
Yeah.
So I often then would just say, great, I listen to you. I get all the information. I will get back to you. But then make sure that you do.
Yeah.
So as a good manager, never, ever falter in making sure you send that response, because then people won't trust you.
No.
Then you'll just be that Peter that takes a lot of questions and never gives an answer. That's not the manager you want to be.
You talk about being true to your purpose and values. How do you actually know what your values are?
I think they evolve over time, but there is this, to me, and I don't know what it is. I think there is a sense of some eternal truths and fundamental principles that weave themselves through all the religions and philosophies of the world and just human nature, to say, be good to others, treat others how you want to be treated, do good in this world. We have this internal compass to know what is wrong and what is not right. And based on that, then you kind of develop your own system for how to carry yourself. And then it's through experience. You do stupid things, rash things, things that were not thought through. And then you see the reactions of others.
Yeah.
Of course, you will have hurt people. You need to apologize, and you need to learn from it and make sure you don't hurt people again in the same way. Right. And that from that, you build your own value system and kind of code of conduct. Being in the United Nations, of course, we're fortunate to have covenants and international treaties that set down basic human rights and how we conduct ourselves as individuals and nations and communities. I think there is a great value in that. And that's a commonality that we can certainly look to, because that's a sense of democracy around the world that says, okay, this is something we should follow.
Let's talk about what being a courageous leader is about for you, because I would love to hear more how, what it's like in the context that you're living in. And also, pleasing, feel free to include your experiences from Mogadishu and all your working life. Because as you're saying, you're living and working in a very complex and demanding situation. So, what does it mean to be a courageous leader in Afghanistan?
Well, it is a complex situation. It's a country that has gone through so much hardship over so many years, gone through wars and unsettled periods. And when you ask about being courageous in Afghanistan, I immediately think of our national colleagues. They're the most courageous. I'm there. I'm a visitor. I'm a guest in their country. I live in a bubble. I live in a UN compound. I get picked up in an armored vehicle at the airport and get taken to that compound. I'm fortunate enough to go out and visit some of our projects and move about somewhat, but it's very, very restricted. So to say that I'm courageous is somewhat true, but the most courageous are really our national colleagues who face the uncertainty and insecurity every single day. And this goes for our uh, women and men national colleagues, but especially our women colleagues. There are so many uncertain factors. Things change all the time. There might be a security threat, there might be an incident in town, and everyone is shook and they're unsettled. There are frequent earthquakes in Afghanistan. So sometimes at 3 o'clock in the morning, my bed will shake, and you're suddenly awoken to an earthquake. You go on Google and you try to figure out how strong it was, and not only for yourself, but also to see, was there an impact elsewhere in the country where my organization and humanitarian organizations then need to move in and support. Um, all of that kind of compounds that you're under tremendous and constant stress. As an international staff member of the UN, I'm fortunate to be able to fly out on occasion and take a break from that, get out of that bubble and go somewhere else and rest and kind of settle myself and then come back into it. Our national colleagues are in their home country. This is where they grew up. This is where they live. And they're facing this over a prolonged period without that kind of break from the realities of the time. I think as a leader in that context, you need to be extra sensitive to others. You need to make sure that you pick up on how they're doing and feeling, how they are coping. Um, Psychosocial health is extremely important in a context like that. And to be able to have support mechanisms to our international and national colleagues in the event of an incident, but also just compounded by living and working in those conditions. Suddenly someone might have something in their personal life and then it all comes to surface, and you need to look out for the signs to make sure that you support them. Also, when you're pressured to deliver, be conscious of the fact that you putting pressure on others needs to be done in the right way so that you're not compounding and pushing someone over the edge or pushing yourself over the edge. A quality that a courageous leader in such a setting would need to have is also in the space of innovation. You need to think on your feet. You need to be able to adjust, improvise, and listen to then figure out, okay, so what do we do now? It's not clear cut. It's not black and white. There's no pattern for it. And the circumstances warrant you innovating, figuring out, well, what can we do in this case? And seeking out consultation with others to explore that. And that will give you power. That will give you opportunity to exploit, to move forward.
So many managers talk to me about the difficulty of making priorities in the environment they working, and they talk about, insecurities in the market, or there are many different things that can happen in an organization. What is that like for you? How do you prioritize with everything going on?
You need to talk to others. You need to talk to your supervisor, your manager, the executive management. You need to talk to your team and figure things out. You can't just pound things on. It comes back to this thing of being deliberate, that you don't, others' priorities are not necessarily your priority, especially as a manager, because you need to look after your team. So someone might come to one of your team members and say, drop everything and do this thing. Hopefully my team member will then have the good judgment to say, okay, is that true or not? How quickly can I do it? To respond, being client-oriented, but also knowing when to escalate. Come to me and say, is this true? Should I drop everything and do this thing for that person? And we might look at it and say, no, we need to go back to that person and say, we'll get to it, but we have other priorities that we're focusing on right now. And this is the timeline. And say, is that acceptable? Right? So you need to know your audience. You need to know your responsibility, tasks and obligations that you need to meet, and do so, again, in a deliberate manner.
Wow. I hear a couple of things when you talk about that. I hear, and I've heard that all the way through our conversation, always be curious. That's what I hear. And here I also hear, and dare to say no.
Yeah. But then give a justification. Don't say no for the sake of saying no.
No,
That will antagonize someone. So yeah, you still need them on your side, because they're still in your extended team.
No,
You're gonna meet them in the corridor, so you need to say.
Yeah.
So the quality of saying no in a nice way is very precious. Yeah.
No, that's right. Yeah, I might have talked to you about that before. I don't remember, but I always stress, when people are afraid of setting boundaries, what happens once in a while is that people are so afraid of saying no, so they postpone the boundary setting until they're really upset.
Yeah.
And then they do it very forcefully. But what you can actually do, if you start to live with boundary setting, you can actually do it in a very warm and friendly way. I bet that's what you're doing. Wouldn't surprise me in the least. Now, back to Kabul, Afghanistan, and Mogadishu, Somalia. Is there a moment that you can pinpoint and share where you've had to overcome fear? And fear is, I hear so many people say they're not afraid. We're all afraid. We all have our fears, and we're going to have fears to the bitter end. So the question is not of being fearless. The question is, fears is something that makes us feel uncomfortable. Can you think of a moment where you felt uncomfortable and you needed to overcome your fear?
For sure. I think I can think of several such moments. I think it's healthy to be fearful and then to reflect on it and look at one's reactions. Sometimes the immediate reaction comes out of instinct and you just act. And then later on, hopefully you can reflect on that and see, okay, was that a good reaction and action, or should I have done something different? I think back to a period when I was in Somalia, and the UN compound was under active security threat from forces within the country, with terrorist attacks. And we get trained in this. Both our national and international colleagues are trained on how to handle a security situation and immediate threat, be it rocket attacks or complex attacks of someone charging into the compound and shooting and so on. But you're never really prepared for it. You know where your quick run bag is, you know where your PPE is in terms of your bulletproof vest and your helmet. You carry your radio and you listen for any announcements calling for go to bunker or find a safe hiding place. Over time, you may get complacent and then something happens and then you're shook into the reality of the situation. And there was such a period during my time there when we frequently had to go to the bunkers and there were rocket attacks against the UN compound. And just the uncertainty of that and the bits and pieces of information that would come in terms of where did they strike? Was anyone hit? Were there any injuries? What else is coming? And then the fear of thinking, well, if there's a complex attack, basically means someone is blowing up the front gate and then rushing through to do more damage. Where would you be? And where are your colleagues? But the scariest part in that was, well, yes, I was in the bunker and then there was a call of all clear and we could go back to the accommodation or the offices. But national colleagues had to go back out through the main gates and go back home in the city. And just that fear of their exposure. And there were unfortunate situations, highly unfortunate situations where our national colleagues did not survive terrorist attacks. And being in HR, you had to deal with the follow through of that in terms of reaching out to the families and supporting and so on. And professionally, that was very challenging. And you were fearful of not doing the right thing, not saying the right thing, not knowing all the ins and outs of the bureaucracy that comes from such a process. And bureaucracy is, in organizations like the one I work for, a necessity, but you still need to do it intelligently. You still need to have a timely response to support the people, because your objective is to provide for support and assistance, not just to be a diligent bureaucrat. So I think in terms of situations of fear, those fear of security comes immediately to mind.
And when you talk about fear of security, you think of, terrorist attacks and things like that. And in my world, it's so much, what do you call that? Less physical, probably, So it's really interesting to get that perspective, because I'm thinking also the fear of how I will be seen if I don't do it properly. And I think that's when there's a physical threat, we realize, stop, vest, helmet, run for shelter. In another setting, it could be, should I say something? Shouldn't I say something? Should I act now? Should I not act? What does that look like? Because you just feel uncomfortable and you don't know why, but deep down there is this fear of being excluded or not being promoted. Think of all these, all the management by fear we have out there. Is there something you're still learning to be courageous about?
There's something I'm not learning to still be courageous about.
Well, that's fine. That's fine if we learn, but we can't learn everything all the time. We miss things, So what are you keeping your eyes on when it comes to your own courage at the moment? And then I'm not only talking about physical fear. I'm talking.
Yeah, no, I'll move away from the security of the physical fear. I think it's an evolution. And it's a journey. And sometimes you take a step back in your development and your learnings, and then you take 2 steps forward. My current focus is really on just understanding my role now. I think what has come with age, I'm not an old man, but I'm also not someone at the start of their career trying to prove themselves, and feeling that pressure. And I recall that as being a period of tremendous internal pressure and dealing with that internal saboteur who's trying to mess things up and overthinking, overanalyzing things. And then you hit your 30s, your 40s, and you start relaxing and saying, I don't care what people think about me. I care about me, and I care about the people close to me. And that includes my team and the people I work with and the people I know I can trust and the people who need to know that they can trust me.
So
In
where are you struggling when it comes to you and the internal Peter?
Me and the internal Peter are doing well at the moment. Better than most of the time. Where are we struggling? I think it's when I speak out of turn. This thing of rushing into things, and
Mm.
and that I can do things too quickly because I am so eager. I have this passion that I want to see things move forward, and it comes down to my personal life. If in the house there's some cleanup that needs to be done, everything gets taken out of every single closet and storage, and everything is upside down, and then quickly I start organizing everything and putting it back in. But it's a big ordeal. That's not necessarily the way to go when you're working with a team. That is too disruptive. So I think I've gotten better to make sure I channel that in my personal life, very physical thing, and then breathing more in terms of the pace of change in a team. How do all pull in the same direction, for example?
I remember this is quite some time ago now in a management team. There was a brilliant CEO, fairly young, leading the team. And they were in some kind of debrief or something. And he said, yeah, I know I'm fast and efficient. And then I repeated, yes, you're fast. And then he immediately filled in, and efficient. So I said, yes, you're fast. And he immediately filled in, and efficient. And then he finally, the third time, he finally got it and started to laugh. And he said, yes, that's right. I'm fast. I'm not always efficient. And the whole team laughed, of course, because they had seen it. They'd lived with it for quite some time. So our strengths become our weaknesses. And that's what I hear you talk about too. I'm fast, so I get things done. But sometimes that's a drawback as well. We need to
And
keep an
then
eye on
efficiency
us.
is one thing, but are you effective? And is the
Yeah.
outcome the desired one? And that's the next
Yes.
level then to make sure, well, so fine, I'm efficient, but at what cost?
Yes. Yes.
Is there
Yes. Yes.
was the effect the desired effect? Yeah.
Mm. So thinking about Afghanistan, I believe it's hard for many of our listeners not to think of the women's situation in the country. Sometimes I think with the rest of us outside of Afghanistan, many of us forget about the men's situation. The complex situation in Afghanistan, of course, also affects the men. So how do you look at that situation for the reality when it comes to women and men, both within UN and also outside of the UN?
Well, starting off, I think men and women are challenged all over the world, and men and women in countries where they're facing injustices, where they're facing a lack of the basic essentials in terms of food, access to clean water, education, and so forth, are doubly challenged. And in Afghanistan, this is true. The restrictions placed on women and girls in the country are severe, and anyone interested to go deeper into that and understand both the situation and the response of the international community on what the women are facing should just Google United Nations Afghanistan. You can see the statements of the Secretary General. You can follow in terms of the statements of national governments around the world on the edicts and the laws imposed by the authorities on women and girls, including the difficulty to access the labor market, the banning of education beyond a certain grade, and no access to higher education and academic studies. And this is something that, of course, the women are facing and their daughters. And that is something that is facing the men who have wives and daughters. And in my conversations with national colleagues, This is always at the front of their minds. Can I provide for my family? And can I make sure that my daughters are educated and have a good future, the future that they deserve, and to be able to reach their fullest potential? And it's something that constantly troubles them
Mhm.
and bothers them. And I
Mhm.
feel for them. And in terms of the freedom of movement, both in the physical sense, but also in terms of their own personal development in their careers and in their lives. So yeah, I think it's not a good situation and it can be very depressing. But it also shows the resilience of the Afghan people, men and women, who have faced a lot of this over many years. It's admirable. It's a beautiful country, and there are beautiful, strong individuals in that country. And I would hope that they would reach all of their potentials and reach their heart's desires.
So how can you support them?
As an example, my organization has tried to give some opportunity to a number of women to access the labor market by introducing entry-level positions where someone with an academic degree, bachelor's degree, but no work experience because circumstances have not allowed them to get the work experience on the labor market, can join us and take a job and start contributing and get that experience. And I've been tremendously impressed by the young women who've joined our offices and units and the way that they contribute. They're very diligent. They are very reflective on their work. They've learned so much and they're quickly contributing in the roles that they play. And for the organization, the impact was immediate in terms of the environment and the culture of the office when you suddenly had more
In
women
what way?
entering the workplace. It's just because suddenly you had national women in the corridors and interacting and performing and it changes things. It was something that was lacking before. We know this in other companies where gender parity is lower and it changes the culture and the way that you work. You need it. Otherwise it's not full, it's not complete.
I'm also thinking of the situation in Afghanistan. This is maybe just my assumption, but it must also help your work that you have also local women employed who can,
For sure.
really share what's
Yeah.
happening out there. Since it's so insecure, you can't travel around in the country.
Otherwise, it's a perspective that you
Yeah,
don't get, and it's a contribution that
yeah,
you will be
really
missing.
important.
So, for sure.
But I know, and I also know that you're cautious in this conversation as to how much can you share and how much what can you not say and so forth. At the same time as the rest of us are really curious what it's like. So it's a bit of a balance here. But can you tell us a story of a woman who really has inspired you through her courage in that setting? Because I can only imagine. I mean,
Yeah. Yeah.
it must be challenging for them more or less every moment of the day.
I think there are many women that constantly inspire me just by their courage of showing up to work or connecting remotely and performing their
Yes.
responsibilities, and being smart and engaging under circumstances when society expects them not to be. And I think that is tremendously courageous. And they have aspirations, and there have been several women who have joined units where the gender parity was lower. So there were mostly men in the unit. And then a couple of women joined the team, and things started to change. Of course, that produces a challenge to the others of the team and say, well, here she comes and she's taking on all these responsibilities. But then the culture changed and suddenly everyone recognized the tremendous asset you had in the team. And suddenly the whole team lifted in terms of its performance and ability to function. And out of that came a lot of enthusiasm. Say, well, wonderful. Now it's a new team, it's a renewed team because of a contribution of that we may have been lacking before. And it comes down to the courage of an individual who then changes the collective.
And what do you see her courage to be? What did she specifically do if we look at that moment?
Well, she needs to be courageous to come to the office for a
Mm.
start.
She could be stopped any minute, couldn't she?
She could be stopped, and then in the office, she needs to step out of that expectation of being a woman in Afghanistan and being in an international environment and performing as a professional.
So what do you think the expectation is of a woman in Afghanistan?
That their movements would be much more restricted, that they wouldn't be allowed to take up just any job, perform any duties.
Yeah. What I hear you say is to be grateful for where you are and maybe not step into being a leader. Is that just my words, or is that what you're thinking?
That could be very true, yeah.
Mm. You know, in one of our group sessions, I mentioned to you that there was a situation that really struck me, and I think I will always remember that approach that this woman had. Is that something you feel comfortable talking about, or would that create a risk for this person somehow?
Well, I think in general terms, the example was one of resilience. It just shows the character of the individual and being resilient uh, in the face of hardship and saying, I make a conscious decision to be well, to embrace my current reality, and in that case, being in a discussion session about leadership, exploring concepts that many of which are new to her. It's just saying, I'm good. This is an exciting journey to be part of. And for her then to take pause and say, well, I know that my reality is being an Afghan woman in Kabul, but in the moment, I am allowing myself to be happy and thrilled about being engaged in a personal journey of learning and exploration. And that's a good thing. And I think a lot of us can learn from that.
Mm.
And a lot of us who are not facing the same strenuous, stressful conditions and restrictions. And we should count ourselves lucky and realize that someone who has a different outlook and perspective and is pushing forward, which is encouraging.
Yes, she made it very clear that even in those circumstances, you can still choose to feel okay. And she was talking about concentrating on the people who are important to her, who give her energy, and that's
Yeah.
yeah, it was really yeah, it was
Coming back to relationships, the most important, the relationships
yes.
of your family and the relationships of your team members and with your manager, supervisor. Um,
And probably also, this is just my guess, probably also somehow creating a mental distance to the people restricting her, which is, of course, what we can do as well in our environment when we notice struggle or people trying to restrict us or the journey we want to make, not let it get to us 24 hours a day. What do you think men can do to support these women?
Listen, be
Mm,
respectful, engage, use empathy. Try to put yourself in someone else's shoes.
mm,
Uh, I think that will go a long way.
mm,
And then act responsibly and deliberately in a way that will empower others, women, men, your team members. Make sure you take ownership for your own actions. Reflect on the patterns that you have in your mind in terms of how you perceive people and situations.
mm.
And maybe challenge your preconceived notions and say, well, I don't expect someone to do a certain thing and then they do, and then you're shocked. Well, maybe that is a challenge to you to reassess and change your perception.
Mm. So, Peter, are you happy to close our conversation here?
I am. It's been a very interesting, challenging, and exciting conversation, and certainly triggered a number of things in my mind that I'll take with me and move forward with.
Oh, that's so nice to hear. Of course, I love to hear someone say it's challenging than that I'm doing the work. So let's close for today. I want to no, first of all, I want to thank you for all your sharing. It's really valuable to hear your insights and experience from all your amazing work, the work I know you're doing. And I look forward to continuing this conversation another day. And talk to you soon. Before we wrap up, think about this. What's one small courageous action you can take today? If you're curious about the new Courageous Leader program we mentioned, the one that the group of managers from United Nations in Afghanistan completed, you'll find a link in the episode notes. When you check it out, you'll also receive a link to a free intro pack, which includes a sample book chapter from my book Courageous Leader, a short video series, and a quick guide to explore options for building a courageous culture. And for HR, there is also a 12-step case builder PDF to help you win internal support. In the episode notes, you'll also find a link to my Courageous Leader book. If this conversation moved you, please share it with someone who might need a bit of courage today. Before we wrap up, here is the legal bit. You know the fine print I need to mention. This podcast is presented solely for educational and entertainment purposes. I'm just your companion on this journey. I'm not a licensed therapist, and this podcast is not intended as a substitute for the advice of a physician, psychotherapist, or other qualified professionals.